All Pagodas came with 14-inch wheels. The 230 and 250 SL had hubcaps and trim rings, while the 280 SLs came with full wheel covers, which were color matched to the hardtop if the hardtop was a different color than the body. Alloy wheels, the traditional bunt design that was so common on 70s era sedans like this one, became available for the Pagodas in 1969, and some people prefer that look. But either way, tire choice is becoming a problem. The original tire size of 185 HR14 was actually an integral part of the mechanical design of this car, and to get anything similar to that size requires some searching online if you want to find a decent tire. One good option in that size that's shown here is the Sprint Classic made by Vredestein. These tires have a classic sidewall and tread pattern and actually incorporate a rub strip on the sidewall, which was a feature of the original Continental and Firestone tires that these cars were equipped with from new. Most all Pagodas were optioned with a radio, and all of the antennas for them were supplied by Hirschmann, as identified by the H logo that you see here. They were almost always installed on the passenger side fender, and some of them came with a little key that you would insert to pull them out. The reasoning being that they could be securely stowed away so nobody could mess with them. There were some variants in the design over the years, and I've even seen some that were mounted near the trunk and had some wild embellishments, but still with the ever-present H logo. Now, of the three Pagoda versions over the years, the 250 SL is the rarest. They only made about 5,000 of them, and almost all of them were made in 1967. 1967 also saw some changes in how bright work was handled on these cars, and although it's subtle, they do kind of mark a transition between the more pure early design and the later, more refined one. What happened was the DOT was concerned about chromed trim that could potentially reflect sunlight into the driver's eyes and cause a safety issue. So in July of '67, the chrome finishes on these cars were replaced with a satin finish. The parts affected included the wipers, the rear view mirror, and the horn ring on the steering wheel. The original blade holders on the wipers for both versions were made by Bosch. And it's always nice to still see them on the car instead of some black replacements that somebody picked up at AutoZone. And speaking of replacements, windshields for these cars are readily available and not that expensive or difficult to install. Now, if you're lucky, you'll come across a car that's just so well preserved that it still has its original windshield from the factory. And the first clue may be the snowflake decal that shows the antifreeze specs, although truth be told, they are now reproducing these decals. But really, the definitive mark to look for will be the words Kenon Glass Crystal right here. When you see that, you'll know that you're dealing with an original windshield, and even if it does show a little delamination, after 50 years, we're not going to hold that against it. Another area that begins to show wear over time is at the top of the windshield, on the header, at the spot where the pins for the hardtop and soft top mount into it. Now, if these scratches bother you, I've got to say that you're out of luck because this piece is held in with about 100 teeny tiny screws and is interlocked with the two pieces on each A-pillar. And that's after you get all the other trim off first. I did actually remove these on the car I restored, and after the rechroming process added about 4 microns to their thickness, they were next to impossible to reinstall. And all the while I was having to avoid the fresh paint where each A-pillar meets the body. So this is something that you really don't want to take on, trust me. I've got the emotional scars to prove it. Now looking at this picture, you'll see that it gives us a good visual on the wood trim that goes across the dash. The trim on this car has been restored, but they kept the original look, which has just a simple satin finish to it. Here's a picture from a car with its original wood trim for comparison, and you can see they did a pretty good job matching what was originally intended for these cars. There's all kinds of aftermarket suppliers of wood kits for these cars and all kinds of species and all kinds of finishes. Some people like the high gloss look. In my opinion, it kind of stands out a little too much, but we all have our own preferences.